Welcome, friends. Kalina and Tapas here from Eat, Read, Sleep, and we are excited to be talking to you about a book that's one of my favorites, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Yes, this is a really cool book. It's primarily on leadership.
Yes.
And I think kind of what we do in our day-to-day lives, we are leaders. So this is something that hit really home with me.
Yep.
There's a lot of good takeaways. So.
Yeah. One of my favorite books because it actually has transformed my own leadership style. I had the pleasure of kind of teaching and walking through my team through this. And so we did exercises from this book and we were able to see it in practice and talk through it. And it was actually really, really cool to see.
Nice, yeah. So, the overlying thing that, the kind of the gist of why Brene Brown wanted to write this book was that there's a lot of issues that she's noticed in some of the corporations and some of the other companies around shame and fear of failure, lack of trust and engagement from the people that work for the company, and even passive aggressive behavior. So it kind of led her and her team down this path to write this awesome book to kind of help change the culture.
Yeah, and I love it because this book itself is very brave, right? It's calling out things that we have seen that are translated as everyday norm in the workplace that really shouldn't be normal anymore, right?
Yeah.
A lot of what you said, shame in the workplace, failure, fear of failure.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think when you have that, it really does rub off on all the employees, and it kind of gives a reputation for that company. Like, oh, this is just how it is. So, I'm really glad that we were able to go through this book. I think there's a lot of good takeaways. There's a lot of good specific detail that she outlines in the book. Yeah. So definitely to recommend you guys read the book in entirety. But we'll kind of just try to do a good, quick, brief discussion on it and what we discussed before.
A lot of the books we actually do recommend, right? There's really no replacing reading the books, but this one in particular, because it has so many in-practice exercises and things that you can do, this is one of the ones that you do need to go through because there are a lot of exercises that we won't be touching on today.
Yes, of course. So let's kick it off with the 4 skill sets that she talks about in the book.
Yep, because these are the 4 that makes you the daring leader, right?
Yes.
And you can teach this to anyone. Anyone can do this. And if you go through these 4 leadership skills, you can be that daring leader to lead your team.
All right. So first one on that is rumbling with vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Guys, I could not say that sentence for the life of me. So rumbling with vulnerability.
I said you did it well. You did it well.
I'm still learning that one. Next one after that is living into your values. After that is braving trust. And then lastly, learning to rise. Yep. So let's go over the first one. I'll let you say that word again.
So rumbling with vulnerability. Yes. I like this one in the book. She actually illustrates the man in the arena, right? The man in the arena is the one that actually gets the credit because he's the one that's actually courageous enough to fight versus the people that are in the stand booing and cheering and whatnot because they're not the one that's brave enough to actually do the work.
Yes. And it's pretty cool in that she does identify that people think of vulnerability as a weakness. Yep. And when you show it to your team that you're a weak leader, but she's saying that's not the case. It's actually showing that you are empathetic and that you also understand and that you can relate to them.
Care enough to actually show up and be there. Yeah. So rumbling with vulnerability is what she says, being brave enough to rumble, which means to have a conversation face to face with someone and being vulnerable enough to say, hey, this is how I feel. This is what's going on. And having a back and forth, open, non-judgmental conversation. And that's not always the case in real life, right?
Right, it's not.
So why is rumbling with vulnerability something that's foreign, you think?
Well, again, I think it goes back to the stigma of the word vulnerability is around like, oh, it's something that's weakness. And some people don't want to portray the emotion sometimes in their jobs, and also or even take that one.
Why don't they want to portray their emotions?
Because they think leaders are direct. Leaders are supposed to be this top of the mountain people that tell you what to do and they expect results. I think that's kind of the negative connotation around it. And some people also feel like maybe there's a culture in the company that we can't talk to, our leaders are in a separate entity altogether. We can't relate to them. Yeah. And the same thing goes vice versa. Even though a lot of leaders come from the background of working as that colleague that they're overseeing, right? Yeah. They get promoted up.
Sadly, it's been that long standing that emotions are weak. Yeah. Like you can't show your emotions. You have to be tough. You have to have respect. You have to, it doesn't matter if you're liked. Your team has to respect you. And that's all that really matters at
Yeah.
the end of the day, which is kind of sad. And that's when they start instilling that fear into people, right? Like it's better to be scared of your boss versus to be friends with your boss and to like your boss.
Yes. So I know this book. This is one of the books that you've really read quite a few times. So how do you practice vulnerability with your team?
This is a good question. I am very honest and open with my team. I share a lot about my personal life, and I ask a lot of questions about their personal lives too. So whenever I go into a meeting or whenever I have a conversation with someone, I always open up with, how are you? How's your family? I make note to remember, personal things about them, names of their kids and things like that, so that I can bring it up. That allows my team to kind of soften up and let down their guard a little bit and hopefully be a little more open to me, because I genuinely care about them as a person. It's not going in to talk about metrics or whatever it is that we're supposed to do for the company. It's how do we engage with each other as people. So how I am vulnerable is it's a two-way street. So I have to open up first for my team to see that, hey, it's not all a charade and she's not being fake. Like I share a lot about my kids and stories and anecdotes, what I like personally, what I don't. My team knows that I love holidays. It's like the biggest thing about me. I share about my kids. I share pictures about my kids, things like that, to open up. And I'm seeing some of that. I recently, in the past several months, there was a realignment, so I got a new team, and with my new team, I'm seeing that they initially were very closed off, but the more I open up, the more I ask them about their family, it gets them to feel a little more comfortable with me, and they're sharing a little bit more as well. And then that in turn leads to more meaningful conversations as to why we need to have a conversation about a work metric or something that's not going right, or something that's not necessarily the way that it should be. So it opens up, and then I get to the core root of understanding why they're performing the way that they are.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because I think a lot of times the leaders, especially when they get a new team like that, they're wanting to just go in gung-ho. They want to go right away. They're more direct.
My way or the highway.
Right, and they want to establish the tone, quote unquote, right?
Yes, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's why a lot of leaders need to take a step back. And the cool thing that she talked about in the book is that it's also a learned skill. Yeah. It's not something that you're grown with, you're born with. You literally could learn this and develop it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that she says. It's not a characteristic trait. Right. It is a skill. And I love that, because I'm actually teaching some of my leaders that too. And I actually just had an annual review with one of my managers. And she actually told me that. She said, Kalina, I actually thought that I had to be tough. I thought that I couldn't be their friends. But I've seen the way that you interact with us and your other colleagues. And I wanted to try to do the same with my team. And she shared with me, the second I opened up, the second I asked them about their family, they started doing all of these things for me. They started jumping through hoops because they actually realized that I cared about them. And it was just so enlightening for me. I was so happy and so proud to know that this person who was really stiff and tight, like they learned this skill to be vulnerable, to have the courage to be vulnerable, and they could see it, and it was immediate.
Yeah, it's awesome. Love that. One thing when I was reading the book that kind of the opposite extreme of vulnerability is, it's eye-opening for me, because I catch myself doing this all the time, and that is being too vulnerable with my team. So what do I mean by that? So I tend to what Brene Brown calls overshare. So like I'll go in with a team and I'll say, guys, look,
this is what I ate for breakfast.
Not that too, but I'll go in and I'll say, guys, corporate wants this done ASAP. I'm just as frustrated as you guys are. I don't think we need. So like I'm trying to relate to them, and I'm trying to be vulnerable with them, and I'm trying to say, hey guys, I'm also feeling the same stress. But what she says is that sometimes that leads to the team looking at you as a weak leader, because you're saying that my leader doesn't know what's going on. He's not all there. Yeah. He's not structured. Yeah. Or he's not going to be able to guide us through, because he's also going through the same thing that we're going through. So she also argues that you don't want to be too much in that, where you're kind of like what I would do, like, hey guys, we got this going on next week. It's a really short deadline. I need you guys to do it. I'm also going to give corporate the same thing. I was very open with my team, and then they would just be like, well, they would see me in a different light.
Yeah.
Is what I kind of
No,
noticed too.
I can see that because negativity, it almost sounds negative, right?
Right.
You're like, oh man, this sucks, but we have to do it
Yeah.
anyway. Negativity is contagious.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think of is, as leaders, not only are we leaders, we have to lead our team, but we also have to be the keeper of messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what comes down from above, we got to filter through that. It's our job to filter through it, and then turn around and decide how can we spin this so that, at the end of the day, if the team has to do it anyway, how do we spin it so that it's something positive
Right.
and exciting for them to do? And then also towards the end of the book, she talks about preparing to fail, right? So prepping your team for like, hey, like, so being honest, like you said, this is hard. However, these are the ways that we can be successful. These are
Right.
the ways that we can do it together. And then if we do, and when we do fail, and that's what she says, we have to say that we are going to fail. When we do fail, this is how we're going to get back up.
Yeah.
So it's resetting their expectations
Right.
and having them not have anything, what is the word, like, just jump out of nowhere and have them blindsided when they don't meet the goals or whatever it is they're supposed to do.
Exactly. And then a really.
So have you worked on that?
I am, yes, yeah. So
how are you doing that? Because I know that's probably not easy.
because that's just again, I was promoted from the same position that I'm overseeing some of the people, right? So I feel like I can relate to them and I can say, hey, look, this is how it is. I know what you guys are going through.
I see.
I have to, like what Brown says, is like create a plan, think through a strategy, talk with them about this is the deadline, instead of just oversharing and feeling like I need to relate to them. I just say, guys, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We need to get it done. But here's what we're going to do. Let's talk together. Let's talk through how we're going to do it. What does failure look like a week from now if we don't do this?
Yeah.
And go through it one by one. I have to remind myself, because that's my natural instinct, is to go in and say, guys, okay, I know you guys are all stressed out. Come here.
You're like the Papa Bear, right?
Let's just talk through it. Come on, I know it's stressful. I have to learn to kind of step away from that a little bit.
So this actually leads into the next part of the book. Clear is kind.
Yes.
Unclear is unkind. So if you
Love
make
that.
your message clear and you have clarity, then it's kind, versus if you just go in with the mumble jumble of everything from corporate, it's not necessarily clear. It's just all over the place. And in essence, you're being unkind to your team because you're giving them the information that they may or may not necessarily need.
Yeah. And a lot of people are very passive. So, they'll go to their location, they'll go oversee their team, and they'll just say, hey, Kalina, you're doing a really great job with this. What's going on? Like, amazing job. Love what you're doing. Performance review comes around, and you're like, sorry, you're not meeting expectations. And you're like, but you're telling me I'm doing an amazing job. You're telling me all these great things.
Yeah.
And again, that's so you're being unclear, because I should have told you, hey, we're not going down the right path. I'm being very unclear with my feedback to you. And then when it comes time for it, I tell you, sorry, you're not going to get a raise. And you're just like, okay, that's
So
not
is
very
that the
kind
type of
you.
leader you are?
I was.
Okay.
I was. And again, that goes into me trying to be a people pleaser, thinking that I have to continuously be nice to everybody and just be like, it's okay, we'll get through it. And then obviously, when you don't meet your metrics, you have to give the feedback to some of them. And then that's when I'm like stressing myself out. So I've learned to, over time, again, learn skill.
Yeah.
Over time, say, you know what, if it's not going well, this person's not doing well, I'm just going to tell them, hey, I'm going to have a very uncomfortable conversation with you right now. I need to tell you we're not doing a great job here. Here's what I want to support you with.
Yeah.
Here's how we'll get better, and then we can go from there. So at least that way, when it does come time for reviews or whatever it might be, it's not like, oh,
It's not a
Tapas is
surprise.
something coming. It's not a left field thing. It's like he's told me a couple of times in the past, I know I'm not doing a great job at this. I'm expecting this.
I'm going to be vulnerable and share. I'm actually probably the extreme opposite, where I am too open with how I feel, and I'm just straight up like, this sucks. Like, you're sucking right now, and you need to stop sucking because everything sucks because of it's not that bad, but I do tend to be a little more forthcoming than I should, and so in over the past couple of years, I've learned how to finesse some of that. And what I think I've learned along the way, and as I'm learning this and teaching it to my leaders as well, is that you don't have to be mean when you're giving honest feedback, right? And I think that's what some people equate it with, which is why they don't give the honest truth, is that they think it's mean. But think about it almost like a parent, right? We both have kids. If you truly care, right? If you're if my 5-year-old asks me at 10 o'clock to have candy, right, I'm not going to say nice and be like, okay, because you know what's good for them and what's not good for them. You care enough to be strict. And even if my son says, I hate you, you're the worst mom ever, I'm okay with that because I know that I'm trying to prevent cavities or whatnot or a sugar rush. The same goes for the workplace. You have to be able to be honest and care enough to tell them the truth, even when it doesn't feel good for the other person, and especially when it doesn't feel good for you. And I always tell myself, am I telling this person because I care, or am I just not saying because, you know, and that's kind of like what I've learned through the years is my gauge is that when I really care about someone, I really take the time and I sit them down and say, okay, these are all the things that we can work on together. These are what I'm seeing. This is my perspective. What do you see? And we have that honest, genuine conversation. If it's someone that I'm like, oh, this person has like no hope at all, I'm going to, you know, they may not be on the team much longer, then sometimes, to be honest, right, I don't even care enough to give them the feedback because I just don't care, right? So that's how I know, at least for my gauge, is if you care, you will spend the time to tell someone something, even if it doesn't feel good all the time.
Right, yeah. I mean, you can't always manage the egos. Sometimes you come across, and some people you'll give them feedback once, and they'll just say, I don't care. And it's hard to get those people to change your mind over time.
And Brene says it's not your responsibility to. You don't own anyone else's emotions. And that's what I really took away from this part as well, is that everyone's entitled to their emotions. They can be pissed off. They can be upset at you. If I come to someone and I say, hey, your performance is lacking because A, B, C, D, they can be upset. They have the right to be. However, there are boundaries to that. They can't yell. They can't, be insubordinate and defiant and talk back and whatnot. We have to have an honest conversation about it, and a respectful conversation. Yeah.
And then I don't know if you remember this is from a while ago, but one of our therapy sessions that we would have on the phone, you always would remind me, like, Tapis, are you being nice or are you being kind? And you would always like remind me that, because that was something that I always said, because you said being kind means that you can always be honest with them too and say, hey, you need to give them the feedback and just don't try to be nice and just try to fluff the words up. Be kind and say, hey, this is what we're struggling with. Right? So I like that a lot. Thank you for that. The next one that she goes into is about armory.
Yes. I shy away from this because I do know myself. I put up a lot of armor. It is a emotional thing. It is instilled in me. It's innate from growing up, from feeling that through my experience, I had to be really tough and I had to have this like tough exterior and armor to put up in order to earn and gain respect from my team. So it's taken me quite a time to realize and understand what my armor meant for me and how to take it off piece by piece. So when I actually did this book with my last team, this part was very unsettling for me. This is like where my vulnerability really hit in, because, out comes a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of embarrassment because armor is that defense mechanism, right? It's that shield that you put up immediately when you feel like you need to protect yourself. So the whole concept of taking off your armor is to expose yourself to being hurt and having pain. So that's been a hard journey for me, and I still work through that because I still see myself when situations arise, I put up my armor right away.
I know, and that's a natural instinct for a lot of people to put the armor up, especially leaders, because you don't want to be caught off guard. You don't want to be caught in the wrong of anything. So I think a lot of people will put that up. But at the same time, when you do that, then you kind of shut down your team, especially when they're giving you feedback or if they're not performing right. So you don't want to go into that with them and have the one-to-one, and all of a sudden you just shut them off and say, you know what, I'm right, you're wrong. This is what we need to do differently.
Because when you put on armor, think of it, it's almost like robotic, right? You put on armor. So when you become robotic, it's almost, you cut that human connection and relationship bond.
Yeah. So over time, how have you been able to kind of lay down the armor?
Oh, it's been a lot of tears, a lot of practice. A lot of questions, right? So when something happens, I really have to take that step back and breathe and ask why. Why do I feel this way? What is triggering my feeling? Why am I so upset? Is it because what this person says is true? Is this, just just questions and getting to the root of it all. And a lot of times it's not because of what anyone says. It's just my own personal perception of me and what I need to work through.
Yeah, especially the last book we talked about with 7 Habits, how Stephen Covey was saying about making sure that you understand before you understood as well. So like a lot of times, people will put up the armor because they don't want to bother with understanding what the other person is saying. They're just going to put up their armor and say, you know what, I don't care. This is what we're doing differently. So a lot of times I think being open and vulnerable to it and opening yourself up, a lot of times that helps out. I think that's what I try to do the most is say, let's just find out what's happening. And sometimes it can go into a very emotional discussion with your team or a specific colleague. And it's uncomfortable for me because, me, Kalina, if somebody cries in front of me, I don't know what to do. Like, I start laughing, which is not the right response.
You don't laugh. I cried with you and you don't laugh. But,
I'll, turn away. I'll change the subject because I just, as my natural instinct is, I don't want to, say the wrong thing and make them even cry more. But it will go down that path, right? And that's okay because, again, we're opening up our emotions because sometimes jobs and careers are stressful, so you don't want to say this is a unemotional state that you're working in. You want to be able to just say, hey, yeah, this is frustrating. I know we're really struggling here. Tell me, let's just talk through it. I think that's the main thing that I try to do is just be honest with me. Is this what you're doing not for you? Let's talk about that.
She says something in the book where she says that you have to invest time in your people up front. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of time in the end chasing processes and fixing problems and having the same conversation over and over again. Right. And I think that's part of it as well. You mentioned it may be because people don't care, but it's also because we may not have the time, right? When you're at work and there's so many competing priorities all the time, you're running left and right. It could be you care, but you just don't have enough time to have with that person to have a true, genuine conversation. And that's where we have to say, look, we have to start somewhere, right? It's like the chicken or the egg, which one came first? If you don't put your foot down and stop to stop this cycle and say, I'm going to start investing time in my people, and then over time stop chasing fire drills, because all you're going to be doing is chasing fire drills left and right, and you're spending time either way. Are you spending time putting out fires, or are you spending time with your people? And it should be the other way around. You spend more time with your people so that you don't have as many fires to have to put out.
And as leaders, you have to understand that when you're spending the time with the people and training them, it's gonna take some time, obviously, to get to that point. And in that time frame, you will have metrics and things that will struggle because you're having honest conversation. You're opening yourselves up. You're trying to find out what the root cause is. So a lot of times you have to be okay with that too, because some people are just in I need to meet my metrics. I need to be the best of the best, and I need to make sure my team is 100%. And you can get there, but then your team will get disengaged because you're just going to be chasing the metric from the top.
Absolutely. And this is where the courage comes in, right? Because you have to be able to put your foot down and say, in this amount of time, I'm not going to be the best of the best because I have to invest in my team. But at the same time, you have to answer to someone. So that's where your courage comes in, and you have to be able to stand up for what you know is right and true, the process of teaching people versus the process of chasing a number. Yeah. And if you can't have the courage to speak up, that's when you're going to feel that it's always that pressure. It's not going to feel good. You're not going to know how to do everything all at once. Right. And the reality is you don't have to do everything all at once. If you actually just put your time into your people, everything else falls into place.
Yep, exactly. Love that. So there's 16 types of armor that people.
That's a lot. I probably had all of them on at one point.
So let me go through the all 16 of them, and then both probably choose one that we kind of worked on.
Ooh.
So the first one is perfectionism. Second one is foreboding joy.
Guilty.
Numbing. Winner versus loser mentality. Know-it-all. Hiding behind cynicism or sarcasm. Using criticism as a shield. Exploiting power. Hustling blindly, leading with compliance and control, pegging self-worth to productivity, condoning a fitting in culture, exploiting certainty or fear, focusing on personal credit, zigzagging, and lastly, leading from hurt.
Oh man.
And this actually, I was reading it. There's quite a few that I think I.
As you were reading this, I felt my armor go up. I was
Right.
like, dang, this all hits close to home, all of it.
Yeah. So which one? I mean,
So
a few.
Brown does say that the
Three,
first three are the most common.
Yeah.
So perfectionism, foreboding, joy, and numbing are the most common. Oh man. So what's your question?
so which one of these types of armor, like, do you notice yourself putting up in the past?
In all honesty, number 13, exploiting uncertainty or fear.
Okay.
I have done that in the past. And I do feel that sometimes it's my natural state of go-to. Not because I want to, it's how I have been raised with my parents. Like, it's always been this fear of not being the best of the best, and fear. There's always this instilling fear in me. So I catch it coming out of me, even when I don't intend it to. Wait, before we do that, can you tell me what you think is mine?
Oh.
Because perception is different, right?
Yeah. When you mention it, yeah, I think 13 was probably something that
Exploiting
in the past,
uncertainty and fear. Okay.
right? I think that one, and then
I own that.
Perfectionism.
And I have been working on that. Perfectionism, yes, number one.
I think that's the one that I think, because if you guys don't know, I used to work for Kalina a while ago, so I know
Best
what
days
she's.
ever. I miss that so
Yes.
much.
And I've seen all of
I
these.
love working with you, T. That's why I love doing this, by the way.
Yeah,
It's
it
fun.
was great times. But yeah, I've seen the perfectionism as well.
Oh, so
Yeah, which is
we can have a whole different segment with
which
that
is
one there.
which is a completely okay mindset that a lot of leaders will think, okay, I have to be perfect because I'm their boss.
Yeah.
I need to be able to answer all these questions. I need to know what I need to do at all times.
Yeah.
And that's just the mentality you're in, because that's kind of the role that a lot of leaders will think they need to do. So it's a completely natural, which is why it's number one, the most common one, because it's a completely natural instinct.
I haven't shared this with you yet, but recently, since we did launch Eat, Read, Sleep, I actually have been attributing a lot of my growth to you, because you are right. Perfectionism is probably one of my very top ones. And I was very nervous to put out episodes, knowing that, we've got so many things that we are doing. We're working, we've got families, whatnot. We don't have enough time to make this perfect. And you were like, let's just do it. Let's just put out stuff and have fun. And I'm like, no, but
Right.
if it's not great yet, and we don't have, I don't have a plan for ABCD,
Yeah.
I don't have the social thing yet, and like all of this stuff. And you're like, it doesn't matter. I'd rather just put things out and we can learn as we go.
Right.
And when you said that, I was like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
he's right. Like, what's the worst that can happen, right? People tell us that what we're doing sucks. Okay, great. Then we can learn as we
Right.
go and get better. But if we don't put something out, then, then we're not even going anywhere at all,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
We're stagnant. What's Voltaire's quote? Perfect is the enemy of good. So really, that's been like, for the past couple of weeks, really been like my mantra. And I just want to thank you for that, because you brought a lot of light on that for me.
Yeah, and one thing, I mean, I'm not a perfectionist, never have been, never claimed to be.
I know that.
But I mean, she can tell you all the stories about that. But I'm always about like, hey, 97% is still A, right? Like we just need to get it out there. Let's just try. Let's fail. And kind of what Brown says in the book, right? You have to learn to fail. You have to learn that first before you can get good at it. So sometimes a lot of our earlier episodes may not be the best of the best, but over time we get better and better.
Yeah, each time it gets a little bit better.
And it's a process, right?
Yeah. So what is yours?
So I think for me, there's quite a few, but I would say the one that I remember doing that I had to address, especially when I changed team, was around being a know-it-all.
Okay.
So I always felt like I know what the right thing to do. I know what everyone should be doing, because again, I came from that mindset. I came from the same team.
Same role.
Right, the same
you
role.
were that before you were promoted.
So
now
I did a
know.
great job with this. I knew how to lead my team at that role. So everyone should just do that.
Right.
Like, why aren't you just, because I got all my metrics at that rate. So why aren't you guys doing it? So I would go in and I would just, instead of asking questions, I would just say, have that person do this, have that person do that, and you'll get your metrics.
Yeah.
And that's just me being a know-it-all, right? So I think over time I had to become more curious, I had to ask a lot of questions. So that was where I had to step back, and my old boss would always tell me, Tavis, are you being a trainer or are you being a coach? Yeah. Because a coach is the one that's going to give you confidence. They're not gonna show you the intricacies of every single thing, but they're going to give you the confidence to do it. A trainer is going to say, here's A, B, and C, do this and you get your record. So a lot of times when he would tell me that, I'm like, I'm being a trainer. You're right. I'm so sorry. I got to be a coach. Yeah. So that was kind of where I landed.
Yeah, I love that. It's not your job to do other people's work. It's your job to lead them and inspire them to actually do their work. And if they need help with their work, that's where they go to their peers and they find resources. That's what, playbooks and all of that is all for.
Exactly. Yeah. So let me ask you then, which one do you notice for me? Don't worry, you won't hurt my feelings.
No, I'm trying to think. I don't feel like you fit in many of these. I don't think that you wear a lot of armor. Maybe I'd probably say zigzagging, maybe because I feel like you're very confident in how you want to lead your team, but then there are times when you get that pressure, you immediately like, okay, now I got to go a different way because, I'm on the pressure, and then you let that pressure get to you. But I think that's me too, all of us, where kind of like go back and forth in how you want to lead based on what the external factors are.
Right. No, that's so true. Because I do see myself doing that all the time. Like, what's the newest priority that we have to focus on? So whatever we were working on the past month, there's a new priority coming on board. So, hey, everyone shift to this. Let's just forget what we did in the past. And then kind of what Brown says in the book is you got to have the core values. And if you build your team around the core values, all this other, there's no zigzagging because everyone knows what they need to do.
Yeah. You know what that made me think of? Our own personal mission statement that we talked about, right? So when you have your core values, to me, it was very similar to having a mission statement. That was life-changing for me because a couple of years back when I was doing my leadership transformation and personal self-growth, as soon as I identified what my personal mission was, everything just came so clear, right? Like anything that I was doing in work or at home, if it did not align with what I wanted my personal mission to be, I didn't have to bother with it. Like it didn't fit. And, and that's exactly what I feel like this is, that your values, if you have the integrity or whatever your values are, you just, does this fit in? Yes or no? And then you move on.
Yeah, that's 100% true. We'll go into the next one, which is going to be around shame and empathy. This is all under rumbling with vulnerability. So shame is the feeling that we are not good enough. This can serve us at any time, right? And obviously empathy is the opposite of shame, though it's the way to feel shame.
Empathy is feeling what another person feels and connecting with them in that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know for me, empathy is huge for me.
Okay. And what does that mean? It's huge for you? Like,
it's something that I'm always cognizant of when I talk to my team. I want to make sure that I'm being a very empathetic leader.
Yeah, I absolutely see that.
And that's when going back to the first thing is about vulnerability. I tend to overshare because I'm trying to come off as very empathetic, and I really am. But at that point, I'm going too far deep into that end. So that's something that I always want to make sure that I am always thinking of someone else's feelings when I'm saying things, and I'm also making sure that I understand their situation. Again, going back to some of the other books that we read, we want to make sure that we are understanding first. 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. So I want to make sure that we are continuing to listen to what they're going through, then speak. And I think that's kind of how I think of empathy as well, because you want to make sure you're understanding their situation. Versus just putting them to shame and say, hey, you're not the right person for this role. That's shaming somebody. Any instances for you about empathy or shame?
No, I feel like empathy is definitely something that we need to call out in the workplace, because to be honest with you, I actually haven't heard the term empathy until more recently, within the past couple of years. I
see that.
Because before that, it was more of, they say like the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated. Now it's not the golden rule that's important. It's the platinum rule. Treat others as they would like to be treated, right? And so along with that, it's more understanding of what the other person needs. And so in full transparency, empathy isn't something that was my strong point before, because I was more of like a hustler, tight ship, let's just get things done. But through my learnings, like empathy now, just like with you, it's very huge for me. It's really understanding where the person's coming from, asking the right questions, and really making sure that I understand where the other person is coming from. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, my innate sometimes quick to judge and quick to negate feelings does come out, but I do recognize it. And as soon as I recognize it, I put it in check, and then I kind of go through the steps of it.
Agreed.
And it's a learning process.
It is, yeah, definitely a skill. And the last part of rumbling with vulnerability is curiosity and grounded confidence. So curiosity, again, asking the questions, tell me more.
I think it's a common theme with all the books that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing, because we all have different perceptions. We all see things differently. It's a different dream that we're walking in, right? So asking the question to understand where they're coming from, the other person, is critical.
Yeah, and it's so important to be curious as a leader, because we want to get that perspective of what they're going through, of course. And then also we want to make sure that you know how to navigate the tough situation that they're going through, right? So like a lot of times, if you just, again, being a direct leader, you just say, do this, this, and this, and you're not curious as far as what's going on, it's not going to matter, right? And I mean, I have teams that tell me, oh, so-and-so decreased their time that they can work for me, so now I'm down a person every single night, and I'm asking them, hey, why didn't you do this specific thing at night?
Yeah.
They're like, well, I can't do anything. I'm working by myself, right?
Yeah.
Something that I want to, and I would not have found that out if I was not curious.
I don't know if this is jumping ahead, but that does lead into what she talks about, the shitty first draft, right? So that is that first thought, that destructive thought that comes to your mind when you're assuming and you don't have all of the information. You tend to just make up things in your head. So she says, just be quiet and just listen, ask questions and listen, and get the full picture before you jump to conclusions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, the second skill set is living into your values.
Yeah. And I think we kind of talked through that, the values, how it's important to have your core values and really define. It's essentially, walk the walk, talk the talk, practice what you preach. Like if you say that this is what you believe in, actually show your actions, because I think we can both share, right? We've seen people who say one thing and do another thing, and say that they're all about A, B, C, D, and turn around and they're really not. Their actions speak way louder than their words.
Right. And one thing that I like that she mentions in the book is around there are no different values between work and personal life. It's all the same values, right? So a lot of people, I know in the past, I used to say there's a work tapis and there's a personal life tapis. And you know me, because I know you know me very well. Like, I'm a very quiet person when I'm at home. I'm really like stoic. But then obviously for our work, when we were leaders, we have to be very outgoing. We have to be like speaking a lot and all this kind of stuff. So it's like that. I would consider that to be like a work tapis and home tapis. But again, if your core value should be just who you are as a person, and that helps with being a genuine person. Because a lot of times, again, like you said, some people will say they'll say that they're this kind of a leader, or this is their core values, but then that's not what they really are.
Yes, and you hit it on the nail right there. You said you are a person, one person, right? So you cannot have two different personalities at work and at home. And I think that is one of the hugest misconception that leaders have, is that who they are should be separate from who they are at work. When you do that, you're separating yourself and you're not your true authentic self, and you show up in a different way for your team, and then you also show up a different way for your family. That's a whole different thing. But when you show up unauthentically for your team, it always shows. Something will slip through the cracks, and the team's not going to connect with you, and then you won't be able to build that strong, healthy team to get the overall results that you need for the company, or to do whatever it is that you need to do in your organization. But you have to be your own true, authentic self. And I think that's one thing that not a lot of people talk about, because like you said, it's that misconception that you can be weak, or you can be seen as, not a respected leader if you are your true self. Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of sometimes when, with my team, I'm a very, like, again, empathetic person. I listen to what their problems are. I'm very engaging in their personal lives and all that kind of stuff. And so when I have to put on the deep, like, tap, it's like, why are you not getting this work done tone, right? Which is not the natural me.
Yeah.
They're like, what the heck is, where is this coming from? Like, this is not tap. It's like, and then they're like, I've had one person tell me in the past, like, who are you? Like,
that's because you zigzagged, right? You're with your team, but then you started feeling this pressure, so you had to turn around and have this deep voice conversation because. And
then they're just, and then again, you're not being genuine. So then that leads your team to say, hey, there's a tapist that will come out whenever, like, you have to be this person, but that's not really me. I know I could have prevented that. I don't have to go into deep voice tapist for that.
One of my managers, she sent me this little meme. Oh my gosh, it was so funny. It's a picture of this cute little duckling. Mm-hmm. It's a chick, like this little chick, but it's holding a knife. And she sent it to me and she's like, Lena, this is just like you. You're so sweet and kind and nice, but you'll shank us if you have to. And I was just like, oh my God, that's not what I will do. I won't shank you. But it's funny because, my true authentic self, is, bubbly and energetic and whatnot. But then at work, like you said, sometimes when we have to get things done, then that's when that authoritative kind of like tone comes in. And the team's like, oh my gosh.
Exactly. Yep. So the third skill set for during leadership is trust or braving trust. So there's a lot, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. The book kind of goes through it. Yeah. So we'll kind of skip through that.
So I think she says you, in order to have trust, you need to be vulnerable. And in order to be vulnerable, you have to have trust. So.
Yep. All right. And last skill set is learning to rise. So she mentioned in the book, own the story and get to write the ending. Deny the story and it owns you.
Yeah, I like that one.
So I like the skydiving example in this one, right? So, you have to make sure you prepare your team for failure ahead of time, right? So, and she mentioned in skydiving, you don't teach how to land as you're falling down. As you jump off the plane, you don't teach it. Like, a lot of the training that happens is like, hey, here's how you're going to land. Here's what can go wrong. You learn all that stuff before you jump off the plane.
You just said it right there. Right? I don't think in any of the trainings that I have at least seen or done that's been rolled out from above has said this is what could go wrong.
Right.
It never talks about that.
Right. And I love that she mentioned that because that's something I'm guilty of not doing. Right. I'm more like, hey, let's just get this out. We'll figure out the rest as we're on our way there. Right. Because I'm more like let's just start it. Let's start what we need to do right away, and we'll figure out the end in mind after that. Right.
My perfectionism ass is like, okay, plan A, B, C, D. When we fail at this, we're gonna do this way. When we do this, which is way on the other end of the spectrum. Right, there has to be a fine balance.
Yeah. And she also has a book, and she has an example in the book about how if your boss just comes up to you and says, hey, can you send this over to me by tomorrow morning? Like, okay. And you get you get what you think the person needs, and you give it to them in the morning. They're like, this is not what I wanted. But she says, well, make it clear. What is exactly that you need? What will help me get there right away? Like make everything planned out super clear. Otherwise, you're just going to end up going back and forth, and your team gets really confused by it too. So
that goes back to earlier when we were talking about investing in the time to be clear. Yeah.
So I like that a lot. And then now we put it all together. So we have the reckoning, the rumble, and then lastly the revolution.
The revolution.
So what's the reckoning?
So the reckoning means to immediately identify your emotion. The reckoning, like it comes and you're like, oh shit, what is that? Like, why do I feel this way? What's happening? What are my emotions? And you pinpoint it and you stop and you ask why.
Yep.
Why do I feel this way? What's going on?
Yeah. And then the rumble is we don't have all the details, so we're gonna make assumptions on things, right?
Yep. We're in a rumble,
you and me,
and we're in a talk. We're gonna ask questions.
Right.
We're gonna figure it out.
And in the shitty first draft is when she talks about that. And then lastly is the revolution, and that's defined by courage and authenticity.
Yep.
So, all right. So the last part is the revolution.
The revolution.
So this is defined by courage and authenticity.
Yeah, and I really like that she calls this out because, like we mentioned in our summary, this book was published in 2018, so relatively a newer book compared to the other ones that we have reviewed in the past. And I like this because Brown calls out what is not working in the workplace, right? Things that used to be the norm are things that we need to stand up for, and things that we accepted before is no longer okay. We need to shift our focus to people, to caring, to leading with our hearts, and we need to have the courage to be brave enough to stand up and do that. And this book is what she calls the rebellion. So she's asking all of us to be leaders, to be courageous, and to rebel and stand up for what's important and be brave and to lead.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it any better. I would, if I could, I would do a mic drop for that, but I cannot. Guys,
you wouldn't let me do that. You'd be mad.
Yeah.
Equipment.
And I'm like, don't touch it. But guys, thank you so much for joining today for our book discussion on Dare to Lead. We will have a book summary for you guys that you guys can refer to for your quick gist of it. But definitely be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of cool content for you guys to go through. We have a lot of cool books that we've already reviewed. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Atomic Habits. We got many more on the way. So thank you guys so much for joining the community. Be sure to leave a comment below if you guys have any recommendations on what you guys want to see next time. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our community and double click the like button if you did not like this video. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day. Bye guys.